Hey, everybody. I hope you are as excited for our fall virtual conference as I am. It's hard to believe this will be our sixth virtual conference. PK, were you in the first one?
I was, yeah, that was right in the middle of COVID. It was
As we
April.
were all first learning how to use technology, right?
Yeah, we
But
were trying to get Zoom set up with Facebook Live. It
I
was a
don't think I
nightmare.
actually knew how to use Zoom very well at that point in time in April 2020. My, how we've come along. But this will be our sixth virtual conference. As always, it's 3 days in a row, 100% free, accessible to all, available forever. You can dive into it whenever you'd like if you can't watch live. Things have changed a little bit since that April 2020 virtual conference when everybody was kind of stuck in their, well, probably home offices, bedrooms, probably weren't doing too a lot at the brewery. So everybody has a lot of time to consume content. Now it's available forever. If you want to see the full schedule, go to fall2022.craftbeerprofessionals.org. But today we're here to talk to three of the speakers at the conference and get a little excited about next week's activities. Well, not next week's activities. We've got 2 weeks to go, but it's going to be here before we know it. Now, Larry, I'm very excited to have you today because I don't think you've been on a Crappy Professionals panel before.
I have not. It's a first for me. Yeah.
It's normally me and you one-on-one, just tons of energy flowing in the virtual room. So for everyone who hasn't met you or doesn't know who you are, what do you do in the world of beer?
What do I right now in the world of beer? Well, first I drink it. That's always good,
Good answer.
right? And I work with owners who are really interested in helping their employees gain an ownership mentality. And we do it by helping we create an open book management system for companies. And what that really means is helping employees understand how the business works and then giving them a line of sight to how what their role and what they do every single day impacts the success of the business. And finally, they get to participate in that success. And prior to that, I was a brewer for 20 plus years, was on the board of directors for the Brewers Association for 8 years, served as treasurer and finance chair for 6 of those. So numbers are in my background. Brewing's in my background. I love the industry. That's what I do.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm excited for your session on the 17th. PK, you're up.
Cool. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Pulkit Agrawal, also go by PK, and I'm the founder and CEO of The Fifth Ingredient. We've developed a software system called Beer 30 that breweries can use to track their data from grain to glass. So everything from raw material purchasing to the actual brewing process and lab quality sensory yeast side of things, to the actual sales and distribution, accounting integration, and then future forecasting as well. So it allows a brewery to pick and choose what they want. It's very modular and it has them everything in real time processes. So it becomes a really cool way for them to get rid of their paper logs, whiteboards, and spreadsheets.
Well, great to see you virtually today. And Dana, you were down to the wire to join today's panel, so I'm super glad you were able to make it.
I'm very happy to be here too. Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Kaluzny, and I am the co-founder, co-owner of Endswell Beer, small batch brewery in the making in Collingwood, Ontario, Canada. I am also a facilitator and coach, so I support leaders and collaborators who are primarily doing grassroots community work and projects. And my goal is to bring them together for what they really care about and what matters to them. And I do that because I'm a bit of a fun-loving disruptor. So I take concepts of project management and communication coaching that I love and that I know work, but I make them easy to apply and fun so you can actually put them into action and get shit done.
Love it. So I had a list of about 5 questions I wanted to throw all you's way, but I think I'm going to completely put it aside because I've got a couple themes that I want to dive into right now. Somehow in the past 5 minutes, we've all mentioned the word coach. Now, previously, I've had a session in Crappy Professionals on the other C word, consultant. Consultant often gets a negative reputation sometimes, I think. Consultants are definitely here to help. But the word coach, I feel, has a more positive spin. Is that a fair statement, perhaps? Well, I don't see a lot of head nods right now.
Yeah. So I've got a lot to say on this topic. One thing I do say is a lot of my work is disrupting the idea of consultation and collaboration. So sometimes the way consultation has primarily been practiced is somebody comes in who's an expert, and they sort of come in again with great intentions. This is my plan. This is what I'm here to do. And there is no we. There's no collaboration. There's no we if you come to a conversation with a plan already in mind. That doesn't mean you don't have values and things you care about, but co-creating is such a huge part of collaboration. And so I feel like coaches are doing that with the people that they work with. They're not telling them what to do. They're co-creating ways of working and making decisions that will be really supportive for the person they're working with, understanding that that person has so much wisdom to share.
No, PK, that's great, Dana. PK, you are not a coach, but instead you've over your career, seen the value of coaches as you aim to be a better leader. Why has that been something you've gravitated towards?
Yeah, so and I shared this with a number of people at the start of this year, January 2022. I actually did a lot of diligence and found an executive coach. And her name is Melissa Eisler. She's based out of San Diego, and we actually did a full 6-month program meeting almost weekly. And then also now we're doing twice a month. And so for me, coaching was a really good way to become a better leader for the company and get out of the day-to-day. And what I quickly realized was as we started getting more hires on, that I was out of my depth when it came to understanding just what needed to get done to get the company to the next level, and really needed some guidance from other people that weren't necessarily, friends, that weren't necessarily people in the company, but were external, somebody that actually does this for a living, working with founders and CEOs to help them go through that process. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from the coaching side that I absolutely loved was I had Melissa do a 360 on me, which is where she actually spoke to all of my direct reports and put an entire list together of strengths and weaknesses that they thought that I was excelling at or areas that I could improve upon. And so that really helped me solidify better relationships with my direct reports, but also it's all anonymized. And so really understanding kind of what people felt about were areas that I could do better at as a leader. And so that's where coaching was instrumental for me, and very different than consulting, where I think to Dana's point, in consulting world, you're being told do X, Y, Z in order to get the end result. In the coaching world, I'm never told like, oh, this is, you need to do X, Y, Z. It's more about, what do you think about this? And how would you approach this? And what are the first things that come to mind, and working through that instead.
Now, when you did that 360, is there anything about yourself that surprised you?
Yeah.
That you are willing to share in this session?
Yeah, a lot of things actually from like the feedback. I think one of the biggest things that I thought I was doing a really good job on was like letting go of the day-to-day in certain aspects of things. But I actually realized while talking to Melissa and looking at the reviews, even as when we're doing a meeting and I'm the one that's screen sharing and taking notes, that isn't as much as me letting go of control, as opposed to saying, hey, you're running this meeting, you should be the one that's screen sharing and taking notes, right? So something as minor as that, quote unquote minor, is an element of huge growth for me, of not realizing that, of, oh, like I just automatically screen share and start taking notes. And something as important as that gives people more autonomy and has them take ownership, right? And so that is another step of letting go that I hadn't really thought about until was told from a 360, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? And I was like, damn, that's a really cool idea.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Pulkit. Now, Larry, often breweries, invest tons of money in the brew houses and in their operations. Why is investing in a coach a valuable, action they can take to see greater success?
I think it's, one way to think about it, and back to what Dana mentioned about a consultant that comes in with a plan, right? And versus that co-creating is that, the way I think about consulting versus a coach is that as a consultant, you might walk in, this is my plan, and I'm the one that's going to do the work. I'm the one that's going to make it happen. Whereas as a coach, you're coming in and you have a lot of best practices that yet it's not you actually doing the work. It's you helping that person, that team really somewhat figure it out on their own through lots of questions that you ask, and really help them move along so that they can make it happen themselves. And why go about doing that? I look at some of you can relate it to sports, right? You look at professional athletes, how many professional athletes don't have a coach? Well, I don't know the answer to that, but my suspicion is it's zero, right? People at the top of their game have coaches. And why? It's because they need that help in order to get better and to improve, and to give that feedback, like you mentioned, PK, that you don't necessarily see yourself. And so that you can get that advice and you can get that feedback and you can get those suggestions for what it is that you can be doing to do better.
Larry, has there been someone who's been a coach to you in the industry or just personally?
I wouldn't say in the industry. I landed in the role I'm doing now because I worked with a career coach for 6 months. I was really unsure about my next direction after I left hands-on day-to-day brewing. And it was working for 6 months with a career coach, highly valuable, that really helped me do a lot of mind work that I couldn't have done on myself.
What motivated you to find a career coach? And I love to kind of take this around the table too. Like, PK, you touched on a little bit. Dana, I'd love to hear you all touch on, why this is a valuable part of a business, having that outside person you could talk to. But Larry, first, love to hear kind of why you, took that approach.
Because I wasn't making it happen myself.
Fair enough.
I certainly, after 2 years plus, I realized that I'm just treading water, and not even treading water. I'm just going nowhere. And my wife has engaged coaches before, so we'd already experienced what that can be like in our family, and it was really, really helpful. I mean, it was for me just getting to the point of, wow, I got to do something because what I'm doing now isn't working, and let's give this coach thing a try. And I'm really glad I did. I know I will have another coach down the road. I don't have one right now, but I will down the road. And especially, I think, for owners, executives, CEOs, doesn't matter the size of your company. A lot of times I think there is, it can be lonely at the top. And so how do you engage to ensure that you're growing as a leader and as the owner of your company? Well, you can do that by working with somebody who is outside of your day-to-day realm to really help you grow and get better.
No, I love that thought. Dana, is there anything else you'd like to add about, the value of coaching and, why I think it can be beneficial to people in our industry?
Yeah, I think to even go to echo that point that Larry made around, supporting a lot of the leaders, whether that's like owners to managers, it doesn't matter. Like if you lead a team of people, it's really important that again, you're flexing your different skills and you're seeing where the options for decision making lies, and you're constantly taking on the responsibility of challenge and skill development for your team. Well, who does that for you? That's why I always say, who does for you what you do for other people? And it can be very lonely, and it can also be very overwhelming when you're trying to understand all the different perspectives of your team members, of all the people that you work with, and then your own personal bias and ideas. And it's nice to have somebody to sift through that with, who's a third party, who at the end of the day is really here just to support you. Like they don't have another agenda with the brewery or with the shareholders, the board, anybody else. Their agenda is just to support you. And I think everybody needs that. And I think what's most important in this industry is that people find coaches that kind of match their vibe, because there's tons of great coaches out there, but not everybody understands some of the unique challenges of working in the craft beverage industry and customer service and all those elements. And so I think it's important to find a good match.
So let's take a step back on that. We've all talked about the value of coaching so far, but how in the world do you find that match? Do you just Google craft beer coach? I mean, Larry, you might come up when that happens, but how do you find that right person for you? What are the steps someone looking to find a coach should even take right now?
I can speak on that. So I actually interviewed 7 executive coaches before I found one I hit it off with. So I think the biggest aspect for me was I reached out to my network of other executives and people. I posted on a couple threads and was like, hey, who has an executive coach that they've worked with and really hit it off with? And I think it's very much a referral kind of business. I think you can definitely research in Google and find somebody, but I ended up finding people of different hourly rates as well. I think it's very much a matching on hourly rates and very much a matching on how they interact with you, right? And who can keep up with kind of the way your mind operates. And not, I mean, to put it in a different context, right? It's like finding a doctor. It's like finding a therapist. Not to say that those are the same, because I will explicitly go on record and say coaching is not the same as therapy or getting a doctor, but it really ties in very much of, you got to find somebody that understands what your needs are and where you're blocked and what you need help with. And usually it comes up to asking your network. I posted on LinkedIn. I did some research on LinkedIn, saw other people with titles of executive coaches, things like that, and asked other people in my network to say, hey, who did you actually enjoy hit it off with, and did some interviews associated with that.
I love the background work you did to get there.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's so much of it is referrals. Just talk to people in terms of if they've worked with somebody before, they know somebody who has worked before, and take the time. Most people, like, I don't know about Larry, but like myself, like I offer free 30-minute collaboration calls just as a chance to like, let's just chat and get to know one another. I have no agenda except to see what you're interested in and if we're a good fit for one another. So most coaches offer that too. So just take your time.
And Larry, I'd love to hear your thoughts, as a coach, how someone should go about finding a coach.
Well, I think it depends on what you're after, right? So, the coaching I do is really about it's not an individual coaching, I think, which is what some of our conversation has really been about right here. The coaching I do is really how to work with an entire organization to implement a new operational system within their company. So that's totally different. An owner's looking for something different in that regards. But I'm going to echo what Dana and PK said. It's getting out there and really just asking people, because you're going to find those connections down the road. Another way to do it, this is how I found my career coach, was I had come across a couple of different career websites. The one I did, What Happened to Your Career, was the one. And, it was just following them over time. I started to realize that, hey, this is the organization that fits with the way I'm thinking, and I like what they're saying. There were others out there too that I was paying attention to, and I simply, gravitated towards that one person. You could probably find all kinds of coaches on podcasts, right? And listen to them for 2 or 3 episodes of whatever they're talking about to get a feel for whether it's something you're after. I would say too that if you have an idea of what it is that you really want to focus on, there's probably hundreds of coaches out there who focus on that particular area, right? So searching for that really niche area might be a way to go about doing it.
Awesome.
The other thing I'll just echo on and add into this is think of it as an investment into your business. I think that sometimes when you look at the price for what an executive coach would be, it could be very shocking at times. But I have done this analysis on my own where I think we've probably 10x for the company overall, whatever investment we did, just based off of leadership, based off of the returns for people's mental health, people's actual, ownership, projects that they take on, me giving them more guidance and feedback on it. Like, you can easily put ROI numbers on this. And just like you wouldn't, skimp out on, I don't know, ingredients, right? In theory, you shouldn't be skimping out on ingredients for your beer, whether it's grain, hops, or adjuncts, or yeast, or, things like that. I think in a very similar vein, you would not skimp out on a coach. And Larry, I loved your analogy that top tier athletes, every single one of them has a coach. I've never thought of it from that perspective, that if top tier athletes have it, then why shouldn't we, right? As business owners and as brewery owners and, software entrepreneurs, like, you want to have a coach just based off of that. And it's an investment. It just like everything else is when you go to a conference, when you buy XYZ, you're investing long-term, thinking about, hey, this is going to help my business grow for sure.
I want to add to that too, that people who, if you at the top level of the organization have a coach or are getting coached, you're going to start to understand better how you can better function as a coach in your own organization. I'm a big fan of the Coaching Habit, Michael Bungay Stanier, and the 7 essential questions, coaching questions that really help leaders and managers coach their employees on a daily basis. And one of the things that I listened to, that wasn't a podcast, it was a video presentation, Jim Clifton from Gallup, and they do a lot of work on employee engagement. And he was talking about how we as a society, as businesses, we create administrative managers. And that's not what we need. People don't want to be administered. So what's the better way? It's being a coaching manager. People want to grow. They want to be coached. And so when you have a coach yourself and you're understanding, oh yeah, this is better, this is helping me grow, I'm not being administered by somebody, then you can have that capability to carry that downward in your organization. And one more point I want to say, PK, you mentioned in your early coaching, you had a 360 and you used the word direct reports. And a while back, this is probably a couple of years now, I read something that completely changed my mind about how to be a leader and a manager. And it was to not refer to the people who are under me as my direct reports. It's that they're my direct supports. That my role as a leader and a manager is how can I make their job better, easier, and how can I help them be successful? That's my role. And it's a huge 180-degree switch that made all the difference in the world to me.
Can you just repeat that? So instead of direct reports, what is the better phrase?
That people are your direct supports.
Nice.
Your role is to support them.
There you go. I actually like that a lot. Yeah.
I like that a lot as well. And we're here today because we want to see everyone in our industry be more successful. And, I think one part of being successful is standing out. And it was funny, as we were kind of in the waiting room getting ready to go live today, Larry appeared first wearing a bright yellow shirt. So for everyone listening, on Spotify or one of the other platforms, super bright yellow shirt, first thing that caught my attention. Then PK jumps into the room and he's wearing a bright blue 5th Ingredient tank top. And it looks great. Then Dana hops in wearing, it's not the same shade as Larry, but a yellowish gold beanie. That's definitely one of the first things you see when she comes on screen. So all of you chose to wear this today. I mean, probably not for me, probably not, intentionally to be part of this conversation today. But, how do things like your appearance, help you stand out? And, for brewery owners, managers, what are some things that they can do to better get noticed from strategies that you personally done yourself? Any tips there just on methods to stand out?
Oh, yeah, I have a couple things to say. One, I think it is less about what you choose to wear and more about how what you wear feels and how you feel in what you're wearing. So what I mean by that is when you get dressed in the morning, are you wearing something that, like, when you go out and you're at the brewery, you're feeling like, damn, I look good? Or like, oh, I feel so confident. I feel so proud. I just feel, or I feel like real relaxed. Like I feel myself. I think that's what's really important. And something that I see stand out between a lot of leaders is it's not that they're trying to be bold and take people's attention. It's that their energy that they're putting out and the confidence that they have is so palpable, blah, blah, blah. It's contagious and in a great way, and it's inspiring and energizing for everybody else around them. So I just ask people, what makes you feel good and how do you want to feel when you're with other people?
PK and Larry, I'd love to hear a little bit about your attire to start, and but why standing out is something that brewery owners, managers should strive for that can help make them more successful. Because you didn't just happen to pick that yellow shirt out of your closet today. You had it in there for a reason to begin. And you told me a great story before we went on. Would you mind sharing that, Larry?
Sure. So one reason, there's a lot of white behind me if you're looking at the video. And I've worn a white shirt before, and I pretty much disappear into the background. And two, I don't have any black or very little black because everybody wears black. Well, not everybody here today, obviously. But my wife is really big on connection. And when she was had a business prior to what she's doing now, she would go to conferences and she would always wear a yellow sweater that I know, to Dana's point, she loved. She was comfortable in it. It wasn't just, because it was yellow, but it was also bright and it stood out. And one of the things she would always do when she went to seminars, she would, even if she'd always ask a question. She'd always get up at the end, go to the mic and ask a question. And the two things between what she was wearing, which made her memorable, and two, the fact that she got up and she would ask an interesting question, invariably people would come find her afterwards. And they could find her, one, because of what she was wearing, and then two, because she'd gotten up and asked a question. People would say, "Oh, I'd love to talk to you more about that," or, "Hey, I really appreciated what you asked." And then it helped her create a connection, and she became more well-known amongst people. That's the story.
No, it's a great little story. PK, what are your thoughts on, how to stand out?
I think it ends up being, regardless of what business you're running, you got to find something that is your hook, right? Otherwise, you're just the same as everybody else. And whether that's making certain types of beers that are just one-offs, right? That you're known for that, or you're known for very crisp, clean type of beers, right? Like you have your thing that you focus in on. On my end, yeah, I wear tank tops just because it's comfortable. And I live in Miami, Florida, where it's, in the 80s, 90s and things like that. Plus, like for me, it's an element of, to Dana's point, of confidence, right? And it's an element of being able to just have that feeling of, cool, like this makes me feel pretty awesome about myself. And it's, tying in with, if I feel good about it, then the people that I'm working with are going to feel good about it as well. So I think to Dana's point, that comfort aspect is huge associated with this.
Yeah. Show up as you are, I think, is a big thing. Like I try to really disrupt that in spaces, especially that I see with like facilitating groups, like where people come in and they think they have to present themselves a certain way. They have to dress a certain way. And it becomes, you can tell from their body language that they're self-constrained. And we're like, I call it like sometimes the virtual business suit. People dress up to present this image of professionalism. But what ends up happening is I really don't think that innovation and building relationships that is so important to our industry and every industry can happen when people feel this sense of like, I have to hold it together. I have to present myself because then you're insecure, you're in your head. If you're in your head, it's way harder to listen to people and like feed off of energies and come up with really cool ideas and be present, right? Like it's important to be present.
Yeah, I think it's going to be taken on a lot of different levels. It can be taken on, how you stand out personally, or, how does your company, does your brewery stand out on the greater scale? And to kind of close this little part of the segment, what's a question the three of you believe a brewery owner, a company can ask themselves to, question how they stand out? Is there anything you believe they can ask, themselves to kind of figure out what they can do to better differentiate themselves? Like almost like, what's their color yellow?
The one that comes to mind for me would be really digging into what is your own personal why? What is your own personal purpose? And because when you dial in on that and you know what it is, you're going to be comfortable in your space doing what you're doing with an intentness that's going to be very apparent.
I tie in with that to go based off of, in addition to what Larry just said, tied in with the feelings that you're leaving the people that you're interacting with, right? Like, how do you want them to feel after they leave that or come visit your brewery, and just like that whole experience that ties in with it? What do you want them remembering? Whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's the color yellow, whether it's a hat, whatever it is, it's really just, is there somewhere where, you know, people at this point know me as a tank top guy in the beer software industry, right? Like, Andrew, you've really emphasized on that. So at this point, it's
I hope it helps you out.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, you know, something that people can associate with when you meet so many people. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that person that wore X. Or when you go to a brewery, oh, I remember that brewery because they had this fountain in the front, or they did XYZ that's so different. It's just kind of tying in with that same idea, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Larry said. I think that's just a great question. And like, to simplify it, like, what do you care about? And then we go backwards from that, because usually you'll have an answer, and then you go, okay, and what about that? And you go back and back and back and back till you get to this core. And just to illustrate that with a story, like, for me, yeah, I facilitate and coach other people, but I'm also practicing what I preach on a daily basis with Endswell beer. And what's really important to me is that I left this industry. I left this industry because I didn't think there was a place for me anymore after the harassment that I experienced and the bullying, and really feeling excluded as a woman who was part of the leadership team, and who didn't want to be a workaholic, wanted to have a work-life balance. For me, what's important to me is just like, again, that fun-loving disruptor. Like, how can I come back into this industry on my own terms? And what does that mean in terms of creating a place that's inviting and inspiring, not just for people like me, but for people who traditionally have been excluded from what I think is a great place and environment for people to, like, share ideas, get to know other people, like, have a beer and have great conversations and build relationships. So, and then of course that's going to feed into how I treat my staff, how I prioritize my own pleasure as a business owner and my own balance. So I think it's just important to ask that question or talk through that with somebody else.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Dana. Now we'll get off the color yellow. I promise right now, everyone. That was a fun little tangent we went down. But one thing I do want to go into now, Larry, you spent quite a bit of time as a brewer, but you're also super passionate about finances and metrics. PK, I think data and metrics is every other word you say. What's the title of your upcoming conference talk?
WTF data ? Exclamation mark. Numbers equals profit, or data equals profit, or something.
That is such a good title. And Dana, as a soon-to-be brewery owner, I'm sure there's lots of metrics that you're monitoring. So all of you come from slightly different areas of the industry, and I'd love to hear your top 3 right now, whether it's personal to you or something you're passionate about, other brewery owners, managers monitoring. What are those 3 metrics that are important or you're just super passionate about at the moment? And Dana, for your sake, it could be just 3 things that you're monitoring right now as you're getting closer to opening.
Well, don't forget I'm a certified project manager. So you want to talk spreadsheets, reports, all that jazz. The difference is that I actually like creating documentation that people want to read, that I want to read. Like, nobody wants to read a Gantt chart, so why the fuck do we make them?
You cut less than the last time we were on a recorded line.
I know. So I'm sorry. I can't. You know how good it feels to drop an F-bomb once in a while. Anyways, I love data collection. I think the question I always ask people is, how do you and the people that support you, work with you, collaborate? How do they take in information? I always ask that question first, because what good is information if no one wants to read it or understands what they're reading? So is that a spreadsheet? Is that visuals? Is this Are we looking, like, how do people take it in? I think that's the number one question before you even go and start designing or trying to figure out the information you want to capture. What do people actually want to see, and how do they want to take it in?
That's a really good point. PK, you love metrics. You gave a whole presentation on it recently. What are some KPIs or metrics that you're super excited or believe that breweries should be, paying attention to right now?
I think three that come to mind immediately are number one is cash flow, just how much money you have in the bank at that point, and kind of what the APAR side is looking at. Number two comes down to yield efficiencies. So really breaking down from the brewing perspective to the packaging perspective, just what that loss ratio in between looks like, or kind of what those efficiency numbers are. And I think the third one really ties in from a taproom sales perspective, taproom versus distribution perspective, and really understanding how your accounts are doing and the account health that's there, whether it's broken up by dollar numbers, whether it's broken up by amount of beer on hand. Like, those are all values I think that tie in together from different aspects of the business to really understand what the health is. And at this point, again, there's so many breweries out there to differentiate yourself. Like, those are numbers that you need to know off the top of your head to be able to successfully indicate to other people, this is how my business is doing.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing those three. I know it's probably hard for you to pick just three.
Yeah, I was thinking about it for a long time. I did a whole talk for those listening, I did a workshop at both CBP St. Louis and CBP Norfolk, Virginia, and ended up with at least 200 to 300 KPIs associated with this. So trying to pick the top three is definitely very difficult.
Yeah, so I guess that's an activity that brewery owners could almost do with their teams. Could you sum that up in about 30 seconds?
So pretty much meet up with your team and get like a piece of white paper and put together 4 or 2 lines in the middle, kind of like making 4 quadrants. So think back to grid paper. And effectively in each of the quadrants, you're going to have the first one is going to be brew process and quality, and come up with all the KPIs that tie in with that. And could be something as simple as mash pH, number of times it's accurate, for example. And so that's one quadrant. The second quadrant is on operations and people. That's a really fun one that ties in with employee well-being, tying in with employee satisfaction, understanding really what's going on from a payroll perspective, etc. Third one ends up being sales, and really breaking down as to what metrics you and your team want to track from a sales perspective, whether it's stock on hand, taproom sales, etc. And the fourth category ends up being marketing, and looking at just how much money you're spending on events, or how much money you're spending on advertising, or what's going on for social media presence, or number of hits, or people coming through. And each of those collectively ends up being a brainstorming session that you can do with your team to really understand what the values are diving in from a KPI perspective.
It gets those gears going, gets you thinking about all the things you can be monitoring. It was definitely a fun activity. Larry, you've had plenty of time to think. What are some of your favorite metrics right now that brewery owners should be paying attention to?
I'm going to echo PK's very first one, and that's cash. And part of that is because we're in an economic situation right now that it's perhaps slowing growth. It's inflationary. People are worried about a recession. And so to set yourself up to successfully navigate that, paying attention to cash is huge. It's important. Another one that I would throw out, and I know PK mentioned this when he was just giving his little blurb there, was I'll call it employee engagement. It's really paying attention to your employees and how can you ensure that they stay engaged in the company and want to be there, because they're the backbone of your business, and they're the ones that are going to help you be successful. I don't really have a third one, but I'm going to echo something that Dana said about what are those metrics that you're looking at and how do you want to view them? And a lot of what we talk about a lot in open book management is really people support what they help create. So if you come from a leadership perspective and you come up with all these KPIs and you shove them down to your people, it's not going to be overly successful. And so what PK talked about in terms of gathering people together to come up with those, people on the front lines know what the challenges are. They know what can be improved. They know what would make their days better. And if they're the ones who are deciding that and are coming up with how they want to measure it, guess what? It's going to get measured and it's going to get done. I think to a story that I just heard recently from the Great Given Business Conference. It was a company that people were burned out in the company. And what they came to realize is that people were not taking their paid time off. And there were lots of reasons for that. People felt like they couldn't because maybe they were short-staffed, or they felt for many reasons they weren't doing it. So they actually made, the employees came up with this. They came up with a KPI that everybody within a year is going to use all of their PTO. So then it started digging into, well, how do we do that? And in order to make it successful, they realized there were things that they could improve on the process side of what they were doing. There were ways that they could get more efficient. And through this process of this KPI of people taking their PTO, the company became way more efficient, which was a positive to them in the long term. And it was successful because it was the employees who created that and came up with the metric, as it were.
I love that. I love the tidbits of motivation and inspiration you all have given today. Now, I've got one final question for you three. Looking at your life right now, what inspires you? Is it a person? Is there something you're reading right now that's getting you really pumped for everything that you're doing? Is it a podcast? Is it simply waking up, listening to music? What gets you going and what gets you excited? I'd love to hear, what you're diving into right now that you're happy about.
Okay, I'll start. So a big part of what I do and support people with, but what I'm a part of and the only way I've lived my life so far, it's all about the long game. And it's all about how am I resourced and how can I work with other people to be resourced for the long game? Because I don't want to burn out. I don't want to get overly stressed. And then, I have to abandon some really great things because it's just so hard to play that long game. So all the inspirations that I look for, like, okay, again, resources, things that help me stay in the game for what really matters. And right now, that switches, like, Adrienne Marie Brown and her work with pleasure activism was like inspirational for me. That book's amazing for anybody interested. But I also love to laugh. Like, some of the stuff that I'm dealing with our town and going through site plan control and all these, prohibition era policies that are holding us back. Like, it's so serious and it weighs me down. I love to laugh. So sometimes just being able to, like, listen to, for instance, the Smart List podcast and just hear those guys banter with one another and just be able to just get out of that zone and laugh is very inspiring. And it gives me a sense to, again, resource myself to keep going.
Awesome. I think it's important to have that escape to kind of clear your mind of all the trouble sometimes and just to laugh. I'm the same as you. I like to wind down sometimes, leave my phone upstairs and just watch something completely mindless on TV to wind down the day. Larry, you don't strike me as a TV person at night, though.
We never watch TV. One, we don't have cable or any of the internet streaming stuff, and we can't get any over the air here where we're living. So yeah, no TV.
So what do you do to get inspired?
Well, the two things, there's two because I can't pick one. One is related probably more to what I do every day. And that is probably about 3 months ago, I started reading the weekly email that comes from Ari Weinsweig. I always butcher his last name, from Zingerman's. And you got to set aside 15 to 20 minutes to read his, but he's got so much going on, and his conversations around how you treat organizations as an ecosystem is really fascinating. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. The second thing that it's a podcast that I love. It's the Ezra Klein Show from the New York Times. Again, I got to set aside time for it, but he digs in so deep with one guest usually on a topic that you learn so much, and the tops can be really wide ranging. And I really love how he makes that come alive. So
what's an example of one of those topics that you listened to recently?
Yeah, see, now you're going to make me remember.
You can drop it in the comments after the fact. No stress.
Don't have one off the top of my head right now.
No worries. PK, you unmuted on that one. What's inspiring you right now?
I think for me, it's a combination of just travel and doing different hobbies. So I think to Dana's point, not getting burned out and trying to focus in on your own mental health. And for me, it was trying to come up with something fun to do. And so I recently became scuba diving certified. And that was kind of this element of, hey, let's try something different. And so I've been on a couple trips, and there's some more that are planned out for later this year. And so having something outside of the world of data or entrepreneurship or talking to other people, which I guess to like Larry's point of multiple answers, the other element of that is also just talking to people that are doing really cool things. I think on my end, every time I'm, talking about Beer 30, like even just at CBP Norfolk, having a 30-minute meeting with, or 30-minute just catch up with the owners of Three Notch, right? And it was just so cool to hear their story and just hang out and grab a beer with them. That talking to different leaders and owners that are also in there is very inspiring, right? And that's kind of for me, like listening to how they kind of built their quote unquote business and empire business, whatever you want to call it, and kind of how they extrapolated, how they kept growing. For me, it's super awesome as an entrepreneur as well to like, hey, this is inspiring to see other people's stories. So both aspects of finding the right people in that world and then doing something completely outside of that world, which is very different. You're just focused on something else entirely.
Yeah, I think there's almost a trend in what all three of you said about, talking with others, stepping outside your comfort zone sometimes, learning about things that you're not often spending a lot of your time in, like scuba diving or just listening to comedy to escape. Or Larry, I know you like to go on hikes, just things you can do to kind of, I guess, find that balance in your life so you can be more successful in everything you do. And so I appreciate all the conversation today, and I'm looking forward very much to all three of your sessions at the upcoming conference. They're all similar, but oddly, they're different, but oddly similar themes. And Dana, you're going to be talking about beer and balance, strategies for social, mental, and physical well-being in our industry. Larry, you're going to talk about how to make ownership your competitive advantage. And PK, once again, you're going to be talking about WTF data, numbers equal profit. So a lot of really important conversations to have today that's going to make everyone who listens, I think, hopefully a little bit smarter and give them some urgency to see more success and put some action into their business. So I appreciate all of you today. Larry, Pulkit, Dana, looking forward to beers together soon. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, PK.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Larry.